So number 12, I get excited about. It's bold. As a reminder, bold means excited. Number 12 is entity selection. Entity selection. So to me, there's a lot to talk about, but I like to give Chad the first crack at the apple every time.
We'll try and keep this really high level because there's a lot of different things that go into entity selection, both from a financial and the legal standpoint. From the legal side, obviously, the different entities differ in terms of liability, exposure. They differ in terms of control that you have in the decision-making process. And there's a lot of other things as well in terms of, raising capital, etc. Financially speaking, one of the biggest impacts is on the tax side. How the entity selection could affect, taxes, both, whether you're paying self-employment tax, which typically if you're an LLC, without making any sort of other tax election, you're going to be paying self-employment tax. There is, maybe you want to chime in on some of the legal side of things, because it is predominantly legal driven, I think, in terms of the entity selection, in terms of liability, bringing in partners, how the accounting for capital contributions and all of these things really can play out.
I don't think it's all legal, actually. I don't. I think there's a lot of dimensions to looking at it. I think that people, unfortunately, they knee-jerk into doing it themselves because they can. In today's world, they can do it themselves. No offense to you as a CPA, but I find CPAs tend to knee-jerk their clients into things that they're more familiar with, and not always necessarily the right and appropriate entity. And sometimes that's really hard to fix. So
it's because they can't keep up with all the different variations of LLP, LLLP, LLE, and you can go on and on with the different variations of the limited liability arrangements you can set up.
Yeah, there's a lot, but I like to think that we can keep it simple, depending on the needs and goals. I think if you just start with the needs and goals, I think that the pool narrows tremendously. So I would characterize kind of the dimensions of formation, and again, we can keep it high level because we'll do a breakout. I would talk about legal in terms of limited liability. Everybody knows about that. That's why people form companies mostly. There's
one thing everyone can probably agree on is don't be a sole proprietor.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't be a sole proprietor. People form companies because they want the limited liability of the business. Someone slips and falls in the business, they're not going to sue the owners, the shareholders. There's a whole another element of liability exposure that businesses can help address, and that's the asset protection of the shareholders who are exposed to claims from creditors that have nothing to do with the business at all, just because the business represents an asset to them. And that's beyond I think the scope of today, but it's definitely an area in which we play in a lot, and we'll get to it later another time. But basically, limited liability in the general sense of separating the shareholders from the business is a common driver. It's common to think tax. Tax, I think, is a big driver. Minimizing payroll, tax liability, capital gains, stuff like that, holding periods. There's allocations of profits and losses, distributions, which are more flexible in certain entities than others. Becomes more relevant when you're raising capital. When you're raising capital, there's a whole other dimension to it where you want to structure the business in a way that facilitates multiple rounds of raising capital. And usually that comes along with different tiers of management and control. And then that lends itself to a discussion of management and control. When you go into a business with a partner and you don't have an agreement, you don't have anything set up, the law is going to characterize you in a certain way, and the tax code is going to characterize you in a certain way. And you have the ability to change all that by just doing some thoughtful planning. And
And then we have a general theme developing here that
what's that?
you can control what you want to happen down the road just by planning ahead of time. As best as possible. Obviously, you can't control everything, but you can prepare yourself.
I've been working on a really good image for my social media on this concept of choosing. I'm excited to post. I haven't done it yet. But yeah, it's all about, control now or roll the dice later. That's what it comes down to. And I gamble. I'm a poker player. I play blackjack. I understand odds and I understand probability, and I'm trying to impress upon people the connection between odds, probability, gambling, and risk with planning
What
ahead.
point do I plan for the risk?
Yeah, plan ahead. So to recap, entity selection is driven in large part by legal limited liability, minimizing tax, dealing with control, being flexible on how you're structuring, profits, losses, distributions, things like that, raising capital, and I would kind of nestle underneath tax the things like 1202, IRC 1202, which can have a substantial effect, financial effect or economic effect on the sale of a qualified small business. You can have substantial benefits because you will recognize less tax, but it's very complicated, far beyond the scope of this video. The point of making is that there's so many ways to look at it that it's just not so simple as you go on Sunbiz, you form it in 10 minutes and you're done. You're done, but you might be setting yourself up for a problem later.
Yeah, I'm sure you see that a lot also. If someone develops an LLC and then they don't create an operating agreement to go with it.
Or they do create an operating agreement, but they got it from online and it's toilet paper with some writing on it. And in fact, I gotta be mindful of what I say here, but I am involved in litigation right now, representing a client who the main issue is the operating agreement. It's a terrible operating agreement, and there's ambiguity on what certain things mean, and those ambiguities have real impacts on how the business is being run, what are the rights of the shareholders, and guess what? A lot of money is being spent on fixing this problem, and there's a lot of lawyers. It's already taken a lot of time, and it's sad because all this stuff should have been done right the first time. So yeah, great point. Did I mention? I didn't really mention the types of entities. Just to kind of throw out the spaghetti at the wall. There's what you mentioned, the sole proprietor. That's like the lemonade stand you don't incorporate. You got your C-Corp, and you got your S-Corp. And I'm sure if you want to chime in, C-Corp and S-Corp legally are the same. Tax-wise, they're different.
Correct. The S-Corp is really a flow-through entity where the profits and losses flow through to the individual owner, and that's where they pay tax. They only pay tax once at the shareholder level. The C-Corp, actually, there's double taxation because the C-Corp as an entity pays tax, and then when the dividends and distributions go to the owners, they have to then go ahead and pay tax on that again. And don't really want to get too much into which one's the right one or wrong one because it's really a case-by-case scenario, especially with the lower corporate tax rate world that we're in right now. But it's really a case-by-case analysis and decision client by client as to what the right route to go is.
Yeah, it's true. The corporate taxes are much lower than they used to be historically, and that's a consideration, as is the double tax. Like I said, it's facts specific. There's no canned solution. I just would mention that there are benefits to forming a C-Corp. It just depends on what you're doing, what your goals are, and what your vision is.
Yeah, as a C-Corp on the financial side is actually a lot of things that the business owner can do planning for themselves with through the business, and receive tax deductions that for the business that they normally wouldn't be able to receive with an S-Corp. And like, we can touch upon this later, but there's a lot of different things like executive bonuses, for example. The owner of a C-Corp can give themselves an executive bonus and receive the deduction for it. That's not the case with an S-Corp. So everything kind of needs to be looked at as a whole with all the different factors and not just one at a time.
Yeah. So we have sole proprietor, C-Corp, which can elect S. We have LLC, and I'm a big proponent of LLCs, which are relatively new, relative to the length of time.
You could also elect S or C status on from a tax standpoint.
Well, I always say you can do LLC 4 ways, because you can be disregarded, you can elect S or C, and by default, if you have multiple partners, you're a partnership.
Right.
So they're really flexible, and that brings us to partnership, which really should have come after sole proprietor because it doesn't really have a formal incorporation. So if I could do flashy light thingy from Men in Black, I would do that and start over, but I can't. So partnership is just two people that are in business together, and you're basically, you have a business, and there's liability, there's exposure, there's rules, the whole body of law governing that relationship. You looked like you were going to chime in there.
No.
So partnership, like sole proprietors, are ill-advised. Don't do it. There's liability. Don't do it. Why do that? But it is an option. So sole proprietor, I'm going to fix my mistake. Partnerships, general partnerships. C-Corp, which can elect S. LLC, which can elect multiple things, or has defaulted to a couple things. Then you have limited partnerships, which is LP, limited partnership. Historically used for tax planning, back in, I guess, pre-1986. A lot of cool things you can do with LPs that we can talk about another time. But basically, those are structured in a very particular way. They're different from corporations. And
very popular with law firms, big law firms. You see a lot of LLPs, right?
No, those are LLPs. So LP, that's where you get to the L's. There's a lot of variations of those L's. LP is just a general partner, limited partner, where the limited partners are just kind of riding along on the wave. They have no managerial control, and general partners can completely control of the business, but also has 100% liability exposure with the business, which is why usually you have another entity serve as that general partner. And there's a lot of good things I could say about LPs, except they're expensive, and there's no need for them anymore with the advent of LLCs. LLP and LLLPs are where you get your law firms and your CPA firms, and the idea there is that you can kind of insulate liability among partners much better than you can as a general partnership. And then at the same time, you can be involved in the business, unlike an LP, which is mostly made up of limited partners. So there's a lot of ways to do this. And, control, financial, tax, structure, raising capital, just really thinking through the vision of what you're doing is important. So I can talk about this all day. So we should probably, move on, right?
We'll add it to our list of individual webinars here.
Yeah.
You're getting good at list making, Barry.
If nothing else, we're developing list building skills. I agree.
Haimo